Hello to all fans of Naruto Lemon. I will post all Naruto Lemon Yaoi, Yuri, or Naruko Lemon stories only on the Boosty channel because Uncle YouTube condemns this. Therefore, I invite everyone who wants Naruto Lemon content to my Boosty channel. Good luck.
お前はどこまで見えている。俺の死に様か。
He and I are childhood friends. They awakened the Sharingan early, entered the academy early, and at the same time graduated a year later. At 7, we became Genin, at 8 Chunin, at 10 Jonin, and at 11, we joined ANBU. After a short briefing, we began to complete the tasks. So 2 months passed. One day we were gathered together in one of the rooms of the base. Why was never explained. I really wanted to know the reason for such an urgent gathering. And soon this very reason appeared. An hour later, after we had all gathered, the door of the room opened and the mouse and some girl about 9 years old with red hair, different colored eyes and, most surprisingly, with a red fox tail and ears, came into the room. I thought she was cute and quite interesting. Then came the acquaintance with this Chanterelle. As it turned out, she is our new friend, but not yet official. Then came the questions, which she answered with embarrassment in her eyes. But then a question was asked about her age. I involuntarily listened, and what a surprise I was when she said that she was only 6. I thought she was 9, at least she turned out to be even younger. Honestly, I didn't expect it. Afterwards there were some more questions about the tail and ears, but here I didn't really listen, since it's not my business. Well, she has them, so what? They are even cute and suit her very well. During all this, I didn't notice how we introduced ourselves, and then the mouse took her away. Apparently to the training field. From that moment on I rarely saw her. Only when she came to the base room to rest or to the training ground. And even then in passing. 2 months later, Mouse said that I, Itachi, and Kakashi-san would be Naruto's partners for 6 months. We must keep an eye on her and watch, so that after time has passed, we report to the Hokage whether Uzumaki can join the ranks of ANBU or not. I had no choice but to agree. At first, we were biased towards her. They did not trust her and believed that she had no place in the ranks of ANBU. But after a while we became friends. Itachi, for example, began to consider her his younger sister, and Kakashi-san his best friend. She often began to visit our clan. She became friends with Itachi's younger brother and they began to train together. Occasionally we joined them. After some time, another ANBU joined us. Alex and Naruto communicate very well and I even became jealous of her. Ask why you became jealous? The answer here is simple. Not long ago, I realized that I love Chanterelle, and, in my opinion, from the first day she showed up. I realized this relatively recently. So. At first I was terribly jealous of Naruto and Alex, but later I found out that they are brother and sister, which is why they have such a trusting relationship. Often the thought crossed my mind that I was not interested in Nara, that I was just a friend, maybe a brother. This made me feel gloomier than a cloud, but I tried not to show it. But after the 6 months allotted to Naruto, we stood as a team opposite the Hokage and reported on the mission. Then we started talking about Naruto. We gave the go-ahead for her to officially join the ANBU, and then invited Vixen to take a walk. We didn't walk for long, after which I took her to the mountain with the faces of the Hokage, where I decided to confess my feelings to her. I was probably as happy as a little child when I found out that she loved me too. From that moment, we started dating. And we've been dating for a year and a half. I'm already thinking about asking her to marry me. But for some reason I am paralyzed by fear. Itachi, Kakashi-san and Alex, with whom we finally found a common language, supported and encouraged us in every possible way. But there was still some fear. 6 months later, I finally decided. After another successfully completed task, I suggested Naruto go for a walk. Itachi and Kakashi-san understood my idea and said that they would submit the report themselves. Naru, after hearing the words, immediately agreed, but said that she needed to change clothes and get herself in order. I agreed. Having said that I would come for her in an hour, we parted ways. I came home in high spirits. My parents weren't home, so I quickly ran into the bathroom. In half an hour, I cleaned myself up without having dinner, left the house and headed to Naru. The fox was already standing on the threshold and waiting for me. She was beautiful. She was wearing a light beige dress, her hands were decorated with simple bracelets, and her feet were wearing white sandals. The hair was loose, and so that the bangs did not get too much into the eyes. They were lightly pinned with white hairpins with a flower. As if spellbound, I approached her and handed her a bouquet of lilies, her favorite white lilies, which were bought on the way to her home. Kissing me on the cheek, I said, "You look great, Naru," and smiled. A blush appeared on her cheeks, which gave her even more charm. Thank you," she said and smiled. "Wait a little, I'll put the bouquet in the vase," the girl asked, to which I nodded. She quickly disappeared behind the door, and 5 minutes later she appeared in front of me again. "Well? Let's go too?" I asked, giving her my hand. She immediately took it and, closing the door with the key, went with me. We walked for quite a long time, about 3 hours. All this time we laughed and had fun. They ate ice cream or some other sweets. 3 hours later, I suggested going to a cafe for a snack, where I had a table reserved. She agreed, and we went to an unremarkable establishment. Having sat down at the table, the waiter immediately approached us. Having ordered dinner, we began to talk casually on various topics, which we didn't even notice when our order was brought to us. We sat in a separate room, so no one disturbed us, and we could calmly spend time, just the two of us. When our dinner came to an end, I sighed heavily and finally adjusted my thoughts, got up from the table and, going up to the girl sitting opposite me, sat down on one knee and turned her towards me. Looking into her eyes, I took out a red box and opened it. "Naru, I love you very much and I want to spend my whole life with you," I began to say, and she looked at me in surprise with her beautiful eyes. "Will you marry me?" There was silence, but it did not last more than 5 seconds. Naru rose from her chair and threw herself at me with a hug. "I agree, Shirkuan," she shouted. I kissed her, and then, reluctantly pulling away, I put the ring on her finger. "Just let's have a wedding when you grow up," I suggested, happily, smiling. She nodded happily and kissed me again. We spent the rest of the evening on the mountain with the faces of the Hokage, where we confessed to each other for the first time, looking at the sunset. Another 6 months passed after Naru became my bride. The clan accepted her as one of their own. Now she is constantly in our neighborhood. I moved out from my parents into a separate house, where Naru herself moved. We had fun together, sometimes Itachi and Sasuke came to us. Alex visited from time to time. Naru always had a smile, and her eyes sparkled with happiness and joy. But all this ended in an instant. It was an ordinary, unremarkable day. But I had a bad feeling since the morning. The Hokage gave our team a short vacation, and we decided to take advantage of this and spend all the rest days together. And this day was one of them. But something was still wrong. A week ago, Alex came to us and said that he was going on a long mission that would last 2 weeks. Then we only wished him good luck in his mission and a speedy return. He often comes to us when he is given a long mission. And this is not surprising, because he has no family or relatives except Naruto. So he comes in to warn her not to worry. It was cloudy in the morning, but it had recently started raining and apparently wasn't going to stop anytime soon. We sat in the kitchen at home and drank delicious tea prepared by Chanterelle. Then someone knocked on our door, which was strange, because we weren't expecting anyone today. Naruto rose from the table and headed into the hallway. Nothing happened for a minute, but then I heard a fall and crying. I quickly stood up and ran out of the kitchen to see Naruto sitting on my lap. Her shoulders shook, and crying was heard, which gradually turned into hysterics. Concerned by the behavior of my beloved, I quickly ran up to her and, looking at the one who came, asked, "What happened here?" I asked, involuntarily turning on the Sharingan. The ANBU, who stood on the threshold and without a mask, looked at Naruto sympathetically, and then turned his gaze to me. Today it became known that Alex Raiden died on a mission. Almost all of his team died. Only one survived, and he brought such sad news. Now he is in the hospital in serious condition, and it is not known when he will wake up. Hokage-sama asked Uzumaki Naruto to tell this news, since she was the only one close to the deceased. "My condolences," he said, and then disappeared. Naruto kept crying and looking blankly at something in front of her. I picked her up from the floor and carried her into the living room. I sat down on the sofa and sat her on my lap, and began to calm her down, hugging her so that she could rest her head on my shoulder. I said different words that I don't even remember now, trying to calm her down. An hour later she stopped shaking hysterically and fell asleep. Having laid her on the sofa and covered her with a blanket, he headed to the kitchen. A few minutes later Itachi walked through the window. Sitting down at the table opposite me, he asked, "How is she?" asked the Uchiha. I looked at the living room, where Chanterelle was now sleeping, and answered quietly, "Don't know." I was hysterical for an hour and barely calmed her down. "She's sleeping now," I said, without taking my eyes off the living room. "The clan is currently uneasy. A coup is brewing. The Hokage is still inactive and is unlikely to do anything. He would rather try to resolve everything peacefully. But Danzo will not miss his goal. He has been trying to get rid of our clan and get the Sharingan for a long time. I'm afraid that the clan will be exterminated, and I will be made its executioner. Naruto Haim won't survive this. Especially if something happens to you," Itachi said. I turned my gaze to my friend and, taking the mug of tea in my hands and drinking a little, said, "When Nara recovers a little from the shock, I will talk to her and try to persuade her to leave ANBU. It's too dangerous for her right now, especially when Danzo starts moving. He will try to control her. And given that she is a Jinchuriki, Shimura will try to involve her in the destruction of the clan. I can't allow this," I told Itachi. He is apparently pondering the current situation and trying to find a way out of it. I also thought about everything and came to the conclusion that I was not going to drag Naru into this mess. I don't want her to suffer anymore. No wonder I've been tormented by a bad feeling since the morning. And this is not only because Alex died on a mission. There's something else here. Most likely I will die soon. And this will not be connected with the coup itself, but with Danzo Shimura, who has been targeting my Sharingan for quite some time. And the whole situation with the clan will only bring my demise closer. I'm not particularly worried about myself. I'm afraid for Chanterelle. She won't survive another tragedy, and even so soon. I think you're right. It's better for her to leave ANBU and not get involved in all this," Itachi said, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Alright, I have to go. Give Naruto Hima my condolences." "I'll tell you, rest assured," I said. Itachi nodded and smiled slightly before jumping out the window. "What about the door?" I asked the question into the void. 3 days have passed since the news of Alex's death. The funeral has already passed, and Naruto still hasn't come to her senses. Although she already smiles faintly, and at times you can see sparkles somewhere in the depths of her eyes. This is at least some kind of advancement. I decided to hold off talking about her leaving ANBU until she left completely. I tried my best not to leave her alone. We walked together, trained, and visited Itachi and Sasuke. I distracted her from sad thoughts, making her happy all the time. Over time, she began to smile again, although not as brightly as before. But that was enough for me. The main thing is that such a beautiful smile appeared on her face again. 2 weeks later, I finally decided to start a conversation. Sitting on the couch in the evening and watching some movie, the essence of which I did not catch from the very beginning, I was thinking about where I should start. Not finding anything better, I decided to start with the most important thing, without beating around the bush. "Naru, honey, I have a conversation with you," I began, distracting the fox from watching the film. "About what?" she asked, looking at me with an attentive gaze. "I want you to leave ANBU," I blurted out immediately. She looked at me in surprise, not understanding why I decided to ask her about this. "For what?" "You've heard of Shimura Danzo, haven't you?" I asked. She thought for a moment, clearly remembering where she had heard this name before. "He is the head of such an organization as ANBU Root. He is also one of the elders of the Hokage." "Ah, now I remember." "What's wrong with him?" "He has been dreaming of getting you for a long time." "I hope you understand what I mean?" I asked, looking carefully at my beloved. "You mean QB?" she asked quietly. You can feel the fear in her voice. Fear not for yourself, but for the Ninetales. And this is not surprising. They are good friends, which is why she worries about Kurama. I somehow had a chance to communicate with him. After that, I came to the conclusion that everything that was said about him was pure fiction. Therefore, I, like Itachi and Kakashi themselves, support Naru and her unusual friend. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's too dangerous for you to stay there now. Therefore, I ask you to leave ANBU. I'm afraid of losing you, I said, withholding other information from her. When the time comes, she will find out about everything, but not now. Fine. I will leave ANBU. Tomorrow I'll go and tell the Hokage about my decision, she said and smiled. I couldn't resist and stroked her head, touching her ears. She closed her eyes with pleasure and substituted her fox attributes for my caresses. I didn't refuse her, so I started scratching her ears and stroking her tail. That's how our evening went. The next day, as promised, she went to the Hokage and told her about her decision to leave the ANBU. He agreed to this, and now Naru spends all his free time at home or training. Another 6 months passed like this. It's been 6 months since Alex died, and 6 months since Naru left ANBU. I began to notice that I was being followed, so in my free time I had to be on the clan's territory, in the company of friends and my beloved. This way I had a better chance of not running into Danzo's people. How did I understand that this was the route? Everything is very simple. Only Root can hide in such a way that even I did not immediately notice this surveillance. Apparently, Shimura finally decided to take action and not just sit and watch. These actions of his promise, the beginning of a coup of the clan, as evidenced by frequent meetings. Itachi began to work on 2 fronts. He became a spy for the Hokage and the Uchiha clan. He loves the village, but the clan is also dear to him, so he is torn into 2 parts. Not long ago, when Naru went to the store to buy groceries, he came to me and started talking about the clan. From his words it followed that the clan nevertheless decided on a coup, and the Hokage, with the help of Danzo, decided to eliminate the Uchihas. Itachi himself will become the executioner, but on one condition, that Sasuke will remain alive and that the Hokage will take care of him. Since that conversation, I began to notice more and more often that Root was trying to lure me out of the neighborhood and from under the supervision of my friends. So far, I have managed to ignore them and be cunning. But one day they still took me by surprise. It was in the evening when I was returning home from the residence. They jumped out in front of me from all sides, thereby surrounding me. I prepared for battle and just in time. The Root began to rapidly advance. I managed to eliminate the majority, but they still touched me and gave me a good beating. Then Shimura Danzo himself appeared in front of me. I was already tired, wounded and battered, so I couldn't defeat him and Danzo was able to take one eye from me. With the remainder of my strength, I managed to escape. But I think it won't last long. Summoning a hawk and attaching a note to it, I sent it to Itachi. He himself headed towards the cliff, not far from our block. 10 minutes after I arrived at the cliff, Itachi arrived. What happened to you? Itachi asked out of breath. He looked at me with a surprised look, and his face turned even paler. Danzo and his men overtook me on the way to the house. I was able to kill several of the route, but they beat me up, and Danzo himself appeared. He took one of my Sharingan. He answered a friend's question. I was covered in blood and wounds, with one hand covering my eye, which was no longer there. "And what do you intend to do now?" he asked. With my free hand I reached for the remaining eye and, tearing it out, handed it to Itachi. "Take him. When the time comes, give my eye to the fox," I said. Itachi looked at me with fear and disbelief. "Hurry, Danzo's people will be here soon. I won't survive." "I felt this 6 months ago, on the day when the news of Alex's death came," I said, hastening the Uchiha. He took the eye from my hands, and tears flowed from his eyes. "I just ask you to take care of Naruto. Don't let her wallow in loneliness and pain. Please, Itachi," I asked, taking steps towards the very end of the cliff. "Of course, I'll take care of Naruto Harem. Rest assured, brother," Itachi said. I smiled and took a step back, falling off the cliff. While flying, I thought about Naruto. How will she survive my death? But I hoped that she would cope with everything. She is strong, much stronger than me. The only thing I regret is that I couldn't make her happy. My last thought was that I would never see a bright and happy smile again. I won't see her beautiful, sparkling eyes. And I will no longer be able to touch her ears and tail and bury my nose in such beautiful hair, the color of ripe cherries. Then all my thoughts stopped and I plunged into darkness. Itachi's POV. To begin with, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Uchiha Itachi, the eldest son of the head of the clan and the genius of this very clan, as many say. There is a best friend and a little brother. But recently I got another little sister, though named Naruto Harem, came to Umbu when she was 6, although she looked like she was 9. Unusual in nature and unusually sweet. Deep red hair, multicolored eyes, one blue, the other violet blue. She has fox ears and a tail, as well as 3 antennae scars on each cheek, which makes her even more like a fox. She is quite strong for her age and some even call her a genius. Shisui recently proposed to Naruto Hime. I was sincerely happy for her, because besides me, Alex, Kakashi, and Shisui, she has no one, not counting Kurama. But their happiness was not eternal. First, Alex died, who was her older brother and example. Naruto was greatly shaken by this news. But 6 months later, she was able to return to normal. And now Shisui's death. I don't even know how to break this news to her. How will she perceive it? Shisui was like a brother to me too. He was always nearby. They graduated from the academy together, became Chunin together, and then Jonin and subsequently ANBU. We trained together and also had fun together when we had time. If I can survive the death of a friend, almost a brother, then Naruto cannot. I see how much she loves him and, having learned about his death, she will completely break down. No. I know for sure that she is strong and will absolutely cope. The most important thing is to tell her about what happened, and when she calms down and relatively comes to her senses, tell her who did it and about everything that is happening in the clan. And then ask for one favor. I don't know how long I stood on this cliff, but I woke up only when I felt the approaching chakra. Without thinking twice, I rushed to Naruto Haim's house. I need to notify her of her fiancé's death as soon as possible, before the clan members get to her and say all sorts of nonsense. 20 minutes later, I arrived at Naruto Haim's house and, without knocking, jumped into the open kitchen window. There I found the fox, who was cooking something. "Naruto Haim, we need to talk," I said in a hoarse voice. She visibly shuddered, apparently not expecting that there was someone else here besides me. "Itachi! Don't scare me like that!" she exclaimed, and wanted to hit me with a ladle. But she didn't do it, looking at me in surprise. "What's wrong with your eyes? And why are your hand and face covered in blood?" she asked. But I didn't understand the issue with the eyes. Is there something wrong with the film? Apparently this question was somehow reflected on my face, since she handed me a small mirror. Taking it in my hands, I looked into it and was very surprised. My face was reflected, trails of bloody tears came from my eyes, and the eyes themselves changed. Judging by the drawing, my Manjiko Sharingan has awakened. Having overcome my surprise, I hastened to answer the questions asked. First of all, put up a barrier against eavesdropping and spying, I asked. After several manipulations, the room vibrated and calmed down. The answer to your first question. This is the Manjiko Sharingan, the highest level of evolution of our dojutsu. But the answer to the second question, I hesitated, unable to say anything. I can't just tell her about the death of her loved one. Whether I was at least 3 times a shinobi, an ANBU, or the Hokage himself, it's simply impossible to say. What? Something happened? Don't be silent, Itachi. Naruto Harem exclaimed, and you can read fear in her eyes. About an hour ago, before my eyes, Shisui threw himself off a cliff into the river, I barely managed to say. He looked at the girl's face and immediately looked away. Her face became deathly pale, her mustache stood out clearly against the background of her unnatural pallor. You could also see all the horror and fear on your face, and disbelief in your eyes. How? This can't be. Is this some kind of joke? Itachi? She asked. And I just averted my eyes, unable to look at her. After all, I knew that this would happen. The main thing is that she survives all this and does not break. I promised Shisui that I would look after her. Alas, but this is not a joke, I said, and was about to continue, when suddenly I heard a roar. Looking at the place where something fell, I noticed Naruto lying unconscious. Quickly running up to her and checking her pulse, I breathed a sigh of relief. He picked her up and carried her into the living room and laid her on the sofa. Apparently this news affected her more than I expected. We must wait until she wakes up and tell her everything. A week has passed. All this time she lay unconscious. On the second day, I already began to seriously worry about her condition, so I invited a doctor. Like he said, she was fine. And the fact that she does not regain consciousness for so long is a protective reflex of her body from a strong shock. He also said that she could lie in this state from 3 days to 2 weeks. This news did not bring me any peace of mind. Although the fact that everything was fine with her calmed me down a little. I think it was not her body that did the best, but Kurama so protected his carrier and, first of all, his friend. The doctor advised her to move her to the hospital, but I refused. So now I've been on duty next to her all week. I didn't even show up at home, having sent the news to my parents that Naruto was sick and I was next to her. I refused my mother's help, saying that I could handle it myself. And at the end of the week, Naruto Harem finally woke up. What happened? She asked in a hoarse voice. I handed her a glass of water and helped her sit on the sofa so she could drink. Having received the coveted liquid, she began to greedily absorb it. When there was no water left in the glass, Naruto turned to me and looked expectantly. Her pallor never went away, and coupled with her bruises under her eyes, which appeared from nowhere, made her look more sickly. The eyes faded and stopped sparkling so brightly and cheerfully with fun. Her gaze became empty and indifferent. I was afraid for her state of mind. I was afraid that she would not be able to cope with the grief that had completely fallen on her. But, still, I hoped that she would return to normal. Naruto Harem, what is the last event you remember? I asked, so as to know exactly where to start my story. Well, the last thing I remember. You suddenly came into the kitchen. Your eyes changed, and your hand and face were covered in blood. Then you said to put up a barrier against eavesdropping and spying, and then. What's wrong with Shisui? Where is he? Itachi? She said, and then began asking questions. Her gaze became meaningful again, and there one could read fear, despair, pain, suffering, and hope that everything I said was just a joke and Shisui would return soon. I looked at her sadly and, sighing sadly, began to say. Naru, listen, I called her that for the first time, but now is not the time to address her as before. Everything I tell you should not be known to anyone. Therefore, you must put up that barrier again and promise that this will remain a secret. Neither the Hokage, nor the elders, nor even the clan should know this. You understood? I said, to which I received a nod. Naruto began to make a seal, and after a few seconds, the room vibrated and calmed down. I put up a barrier. Now tell me everything you know. And for what reason did Shirkuin die, and who is to blame for this? Uzumaki said, looking at me with narrowed eyes. To those emotions that were splashing, rage was added to them. The rage of reprisal against the guilty. I even felt sorry for them. After all, when she finds out everything, they will not be happy, and death will seem like paradise. Fine. But promise me that you won't rush into thoughtlessly. I gave my word to Shisui that I would take care of you, and I have no intention of breaking my word to him. And I don't want you to get hurt, stupid little sister, I asked her. After all, she could really throw herself into the inferno and get hurt. Especially if Danzo will be there and all of Shisui's efforts to protect her from this senile will be in vain. Fine. I promise, she said. I just sighed heavily, hoping that she wouldn't act rashly. Okay. Let me start with the fact that the clan is now uneasy. They are plotting a coup to remove power and bring the Uchiha clan to power. Shimura Danzo, one of the three elders, as well as the head of such an organization as Anbu Root, somehow found out about this. Pressuring the Hokage, he ordered me to spy on the clan, while the clan ordered me to spy on the Hokage and the elders. I became a double agent. I love the village, but at the same time, this is my native clan, my family. But I had to be torn in two. I did not report some information about the Hokage clan, and some information to the clan about the Hokage and the elders. But things got more complicated. Danzo wanted to get Shisui's eyes. His Mangyoko had one illusion property called Koto Amatsukami. It is quite powerful and dangerous. Such genjutsu directly affects a person's consciousness, which can then be controlled. Shisui found out about this, but did not take any action. Did he tell you about Danzo's obvious interest in you? I asked, to which I received a nod. Shisui decided to protect you from Shimura. If he knew the close connection between you and Shisui, then Danzo would have leverage over both you and him. That's why he asked you to leave Anbu. But after Shisui began to notice that he was being followed by members of the Root. And a week ago they surrounded him, starting the battle. Shisui was able to cope with most of the attackers, but he himself was wounded and badly battered. Then Danzo himself appeared. A new battle ensued, as a result of which Shimura managed to tear out one of Shisui's eyes. He immediately began to run away, simultaneously sending me a message asking for a meeting on the cliff. When I arrived, Shisui told me everything, and then he tore out the remaining eye and gave it to me. He asked me to take care of you, and he jumped off the cliff, I said, and stopped, giving her time to digest the information received. Tears are streaming down her cheeks, and her shoulders are shaking from silent sobs. Her eyes again became empty and indifferent to everything that was happening. She squeezed the blankets tightly until her knuckles were white. I couldn't look at her suffering for a long time, so I sat down in front of her and hugged her to me, began stroking her head and back, thereby calming her down. A minute later, sobs were heard. And then a cry of pain and suffering. She began to clench her shirt in her fists and scream, throwing out the accumulated negative emotions. I don't know how long this lasted, but Naru gradually began to calm down, and the screaming grew into quiet crying and sobs. Why you didn't tell the whole story? She asked, continuing to bury her nose in my body and sob. I sighed heavily, preparing myself to continue the conversation, and then said, yes. At the instigation of Danzo, the Hokage ordered the elimination of the entire Uchiha clan. I had to agree, demanding a promise not to touch Sasuke and take care of him, I said, still stroking her back. Why so? Why you will become an executioner? Naruto asked, still crying. Yes. But I have a favor to ask of you, I said, and she pulled away from me and looked questioningly. I want you to take Sasuke and leave the village. I don't trust the elders to take advantage of the situation and make my brother hate me, making his life a. I think the Hokage will agree with your decision. And you will teach him something new, he voiced his request, warmly, smiling. She slowly began to come to her senses, but her eyes remained empty. She smiled back at me, but with a kind of sad smile. When should you start the task? She asked in a hoarse voice, wiping away tears. After 2 months. The Hokage said that if the clan does not change its decision, I will have to start cleaning up. She looked at me thoughtfully, and then got up from the sofa and headed to the kitchen. She stopped near the door and, turning to me, asked. And Sasuke? Can I tell him everything? I thought about it. On the one hand, there is no need to tell, let him remain in the dark, because he is still a child. But on the other hand, Naruto Harem is also a child, although here we can rather call her an adult, and Sasuke should tell the truth so that he knows who is to blame for the death of the clan. But here comes the fact that he will begin to take revenge on Konoha, and in particular, the Hokage and the elders. I think it's still worth telling him, and Naruto Harem will take care of him. I think he should tell the truth. Only after you get far enough away from Konoha, I answered after a moment of thinking. As you say. I think the conversation has come to an end. I'll remove the barrier if you don't mind. She turned to me. I nodded in agreement, and Naruto, placing several seals, cancelled the barrier. Let's go, have some tea, and I'll feed you. And then you're probably hungry? She said, hiding in the doorway. I followed her, contemplating the correctness of my actions. Entering the kitchen, I saw Naruto at the stove, and there was already brewed tea on the table. Having sat down at the table and waited for Harem, he began to have tea, and then had a hearty dinner. I always liked Naruto Harem's cooking. She is simply incomparable. You'll be licking your fingers. When dinner was finished, I thanked her for the food, said goodbye, and headed to my home. Along the way, I thought that in 2 months, the moment of truth would come. If the clan still insists on a coup, I will have to become the executioner of my own family. After the massacre, I will leave the village. I don't know what will happen next. But I feel that not everything will be as smooth as I would like. There are 2 months left until the moment of truth. 2 months of relative calm. 2 months where Naruto Harem will spend time with me, Sasuke, and Kakashi. And then a series of events will begin. Sometimes bad, sometimes good. We didn't know then how it would all turn out. But we believed in a happy future, which should be after all the trials we have passed. Exactly 2 months left. The moment I found out about Shisui's death, I felt the most severe mental pain. And to be completely accurate, at first there was disbelief and misunderstanding of what Itachi said. Then I realized what had happened, and then I experienced pain, despair, and loneliness. I have never experienced such pain even from the loss of my adopted brother. But his loss multiplied Shisui's loss. At that moment I didn't know what to do. I don't remember exactly what happened then. But I remember Itachi trying to calm me down. I don't know how long my hysteria lasted, but when I calmed down, Itachi told me about what happened and everything he knew. I was confused, but with it came hatred and rage. This is probably the first time I hate someone so much. Even the villagers, who bullied and despised me all the time, I didn't hate, because I understood their attitude towards me. But the elders, and especially this Danzo, will never be forgiven. They simply don't deserve it. Maybe I rushed to take revenge at that very moment, but Itachi's words stopped me. I realized that I could not compete with the elders and Danzo, not now. It was then that I gave my word that when the time comes, all those guilty will be punished. And I will fulfill my promise, no matter how long it takes. All 2 months before the mission, Itachi was speechless. I often locked myself in my room and sat on the windowsill, thinking about all those days that I spent with Shisui. I was so immersed in my memories that I didn't even eat and barely slept. Itachi began to worry and worry more often, and Sasuke did not leave my door and constantly said something. Kakashi tried to drag me outside, somehow cheer me up, but he couldn't do anything. I couldn't smile without Shirkuan, I couldn't enjoy life when he wasn't around. Life immediately lost its colors and ceased to be meaningful to me. Kurama kept trying to reach my mind, trying to cheer me up, but he too failed. One day, sitting on the windowsill and looking at the sunset, the thought came to me that all the people dear to me were either dying or something was happening to them. I realized that it was my destiny to be alone and not let anyone near me. Do not love, do not be friends, and do not become attached to anyone. First, the named brother Alex died, then Shisui's beloved fiancé, and soon the Uchiha clan would be almost completely destroyed. But they treated me as one of their own, despite the fact that I was a Jinchuriki. I fell in love with them as my family, which I never had, except for Ku. With this thought, I got up from my usual place and went outside. For some reason I suddenly wanted to take a walk. Itachi is on a mission, and only Sasuke is at home, who, one might say, registered here, trying to support me and not leave me alone. I don't know how long I walked like this, but I woke up only when I realized that I had come to the very place where Shisui confessed to me. Mountain with the faces of the Hokage. Approaching the very end, I began to look at Konoha at night. I looked at this beautiful view and realized that I felt absolutely nothing for the village. Only my brothers and my beloved and his clan kept me here. 2 of them died, the clan will soon die, and the second brother will leave as a renegade of Konoha. There's nothing keeping me here. I have no reason to live if everyone around me is dying and suffering, as if I were a magnet for tragedy. I collect our meetings, our days, as if on a thread, it's so long. I'm trying to forget, but a new attempt stabs me like a needle. I put all my dreams in their places. Stronger nerves, less faith day after day, let it burn with fire. Only thoughts are all about him and about him, about him and about him. Looking at the starry sky and standing on the edge of the cliff, I hummed a song. With every word I spoke, I remembered Shisui. Our first meeting, our first task. The way our relationship didn't work out very well at first. How gradually we began to get closer and open up to each other. I remembered all the happy days spent with him. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. I didn't notice anything around, giving in completely to my memories. I didn't even notice that there were already trails of tears running down my cheeks. I've gone far back in time. Those days when none of us knew or guessed what could happen in the near future. Those days when a joyful smile and happily sparkling eyes shone on my face. Those days when Shisui smiled and enjoyed life with me and all our friends. Those days when he was alive. I understand that I smile at my friends for the sake of appearance, it's not easy. I would put a period, but again a comma is serious. Out of melancholy, I'm flying into pieces. Into fragments, everything is useless day after day, and it's burning with fire. Only thoughts are all about him and about him, about him and about him. I had the feeling that I had returned there, to the past. To the living Alex, to Shisui. I began to remember those moments when I called Alex brother for the first time, and how he did not reject me, but on the contrary, truly became a brother to me. Those moments when Shisui brought me to this very mountain and confessed his feelings. All the ridiculous incidents that happened to us, but no less fun and joyful. Those moments when Itachi teased me and Shisui, thereby embarrassing us, and then we all laughed together. These were the best moments. And now everything was cut short, as if these moments had never happened. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. The song became louder and louder from quiet, but not so much that the whole village could hear it. The tears never stopped flowing, burning my cheeks. The wind ruffled my hair, playing with it. But I didn't notice any of this, continuing to remember. Remember all the incidents that happened on missions that were carried out together. Remember all the training done, all the dates that were successful and unsuccessful. All kisses on the cheeks, 4 more. He said that I was still little, although I looked older, innocent, light kisses on the lips and hugs. I remembered evening walks and picnics. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. I also remembered the date where Shisui proposed to me and my joyful acceptance. The faces of all the Uchiha, and especially the faces of Alex, Itachi, Kakashi, and Sasuke, at our news of the future wedding, which was supposed to take place in a few years. Congratulations and happy smiles, as well as joyful eyes. But now this will not happen, just like our wedding. After all, he is no longer around. I remembered how I found out about Alex's death. The way he reassured me and said that everything would be fine. I also remembered our conversation then. And then I remembered the news of his death, which was completely unexpected for me. But this news completely crushed me, as did the subsequent conversation. After all, I will no longer be the same. I won't be able to smile and enjoy life like I used to. I will rise to the sky with him. I will rise to the sky with him. I will fall into the abyss after him. I will follow him, sorry, pride. I will follow him alone, I will follow him alone. With the last lines of the song, I realized that there was no point in living anymore. I turned my expressionless gaze down and wanted to take a step forward and had already raised my leg when I was stopped by someone's arms that hugged me from the back. Naruto Harem, please don't do this. Please, said a boyish voice. I turned back and saw Sasuke, who hugged me, thereby stopping me. You must live for Shisui-san and Alex-san. You must live at least for the sake of those who are alive and next to you. Think about Nissan. He's very worried about you, just like me. Please, Naruto Harem. Sasuke asked. I looked into his eyes and saw that he really cared about me. Looking into his eyes, which were wet, I thought that Itachi would be hard. After all, he lost his best friend, and now he may also lose me. I realized that I would cause him the same pain that I was experiencing now. And I don't want Itachi-kun to suffer even more because of me, because he will soon lose his entire family. And I'll only make it worse. Tears flowed with a vengeance, and I sat down on the ground, along with Sasuke, who did not stop hugging me. I suddenly realized what a fool I was. With my death, I can cause pain to the people dear to me that I still have. At that moment I decided to move on with my life, for their sake. But I will never be the same as I was. I have changed after losing 2 people dear to me. After losing my older brother and loved one. I'm sorry, Sasuke, I said quietly when my sobs subsided, but the tears continued to fall. Forgive me, fool. I didn't understand that I could hurt someone, I said. Pulling away from Uchiha Jr. and looking into his eyes, I smiled, probably my last sincere smile. Thank you for helping me understand this. 2 months have passed. Today will come, day X. Today Itachi will learn the final decision of the elders and the Hokage. Today the fate of the entire Uchiha clan will be decided. I sat at home on the couch in the living room and waited for Itachi with the news. I was very nervous, because the clan had become a family to me. All these 2 months they supported me and did not allow me to completely plunge into despair. Without leaving me alone for a moment. And I am grateful to them for this. Although no matter how hard they tried, I still couldn't smile a sincere and happy smile. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice Itachi appearing in the room. He put his hand on my shoulder, which made me flinch and turn to the Uchiha. "And? What did they say?" I immediately asked, getting down to business. Itachi averted his eyes, in which I managed to see pain and humility. "The Hokage gave the order to destroy the Uchiha clan. Tonight," he said. I immediately became sad, and tears of bitterness flowed down my cheeks again. "I will become the executioner. But with one condition. Sasuke will live." The Hokage and the elders agreed to this condition. The Uchiha continued. "Naruto Harem, I have 3 requests for you." I raised my tear-stained eyes and looked at Ida. "First of all, could you be with Sasuke during the mission?" "Of course, what can we talk about?" "I'll be with him the whole time. I will install several barriers on the house, one of which will be soundproof," I said. "Itachi is like a second brother to me, so I will fulfill all his requests, no matter what they are. Second, tell everything to Sasuke. Tell him not to take revenge on anyone headlong. Tell him that I love him and did not mean him harm. And the last request, if you receive a letter from me within 2 weeks, then take Sasuke and leave the village on a journey," he said. I nodded to him readily, thereby indicating that I would comply with his requests. I wiped away my tears and hugged Itachi, giving my warmth and support. And 2 hours later he left. 10 minutes later, Sasuke came. And 4 hours later, Itachi's mission began. I was sitting on the same couch, but with Sasuke. There are several barriers around the house, and tears are streaming down my face again. Sasuke looks at me with confusion and concern, from which I involuntarily look away. "Naruto Harem, did something happen?" asked Sasuke. I shuddered in surprise and returned my gaze to the Uchiha. "Sasuke, we need to talk seriously," I say. Taking in more air, pulling myself together and wiping away my tears, I started a conversation. I told him everything Itachi told me, without holding anything back. He must know what is really happening and who is to blame. "Sasuke, that's all I know myself." More precisely, everything that Itachi told me, I finished and looked into the eyes of the younger Uchiha. There was anger, hatred, rage. All these feelings splashed in his black eyes, which turned red with 3 black commas at once. Apparently it was too much of a shock for him. So he awakened the Sharingan with 3 tomo at once. I immediately hastened to calm him down, otherwise he would be smart enough to rush to take revenge on everyone responsible. "Don't even think about going to carry out your revenge. Believe me, I want to get even with them too. But now we are too weak to openly oppose the elders, especially Danzo. We must become stronger so that we can punish them. Itachi wouldn't want his beloved little brother to get hurt, or worse, die due to his own stupidity. Don't repeat my mistake 2 months ago," I said. "Okay, Naruto Harem," Sasuke said and immediately lost consciousness. Apparently awakening the Sharingan with 3 commas at once was a big strain on his body. Putting him on the sofa and covering him with a blanket, I began to wait for him to wake up. 2 weeks have passed. Sasuke lay unconscious for 3 days. I was very worried about his condition, so I invited a doctor to the house so that he could look at Sasuke. Of course, this was the doctor who treated me normally, and not like everyone else. He reassured me, saying that he was exhausted and that he needed a good rest and not to strain too much. Thanking the doctor, I began to care for the Uchiha more diligently. When he woke up and was in complete order, we cleaned up the block after the night of the massacre, and also buried all the dead. More precisely, they were cremated so that no one would find out the secrets of the Uchiha clan and steal their eyes. Although someone has already done this, during these few days that Sasuke spent in bed. Afterwards, Sasuke continued to go to the academy, and I took care of the house, since I didn't go to this very academy, and I left ANBU a long time ago. This is how the 2 weeks passed. And one day I received a letter from Itachi, along with several jars of solution containing the Sharingan. And a day later, Sasuke and I learned about Itachi's death. For the Uchiha, this news came as a blow. For several weeks he walked around pale, tired, sleep-deprived, with red eyes and bruises. He ate almost nothing and did not speak. And I stopped going to the academy. I understand him. After all, I myself lost people dear to me. Even more than Sasuke. We supported each other and did not leave each other for long. Several more days passed like this. Sasuke came to his senses, although not completely, but at least he began to eat as usual and talk more often. After Uchiha felt better, I finally decided to go to the Hokage. After preparing breakfast and eating, I warned him to get ready, since we would soon leave the village. Sasuke silently agreed and went to his room to collect everything he needed. Meanwhile, I headed to the residence. Half an hour later, I stood near the door to the Hokage's office. After knocking and hearing "come in," I opened the door and walked into the room. The Hokage was sitting at the table and, as usual, sorting through stacks of documents, smoking his pipe. "Hokage-sama, I have a conversation with you," I said, thereby distracting the old man from his papers. "Naruto? Something happened?" he asked, putting the piece of paper aside and looking at me with an attentive gaze. "Yes. I would like to leave the village with Sasuke. It will be more dangerous for both me and him to be here. They won't reach us outside of Konoha. At the same time, I'll train Sasuke, and I'll improve my strength myself," I said and, after a short pause, continued. "But keep in mind that if you don't let us go, we will leave anyway. There's nothing keeping us here anymore. Everyone who was dear to us is dead. So choose. Either we leave on our own and never return, or you let us go, and we will someday return to the village. What will you choose?" The old man thought, smoking his pipe. I didn't bother him, letting him make a choice. Several minutes passed in silence, when suddenly the Hokage spoke. "Fine. You can leave the village. But you will return to the distribution of genin into teams. All clear?" The Hokage gave his answer, asking at the same time. I sighed with relief. Still, I didn't want to leave the village as a renegade. "Yes, Hokage-sama. Can I go?" "Go," he allowed, and I immediately disappeared from the office. Appearing in the house, I called Sasuke. "My things have long been collected and rest in one scroll, which is in my pouch." The Uchiha came down from the second floor, carrying a backpack with him. I walked up to him, took out a free scroll from my pouch, and quickly sealed his things. "Come on, we have to go," I said and headed towards the exit. Sasuke followed me, not lagging behind. Having placed several more reliable barriers on the house and its territory, we walked with a clear conscience to the exit from the village. Approaching the gate, I saw Kakashi standing with his elbows on a tree. "Oh, Kakashi," I greeted him. "Oh, Kakashi-sensei," Sasuke greeted. "Oh, Naruto, Sasuke. Are you leaving?" he asked, to which I just nodded. "Clear. When will you be back?" "For the distribution of Sasuke's release," I answered. "Good luck to you, Naruto. I hope you can smile like before again someday," he said. I just smiled sadly without answering. Yes, in principle, my answer was not required. "Sasuke, please take care of her," Kakashi turned to the Uchiha. "Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei. I will protect her and take care of her, instead of them," the brunette said and smiled. Kakashi smiled back and patted him on the head. "Goodbye, Kakashi." "Goodbye, Kakashi-sensei." We said goodbye and left the village. When we had already moved a sufficient distance, the wind carried my friend's words to me. "Not goodbye, but see you later, Naruto. Come back quickly." I smiled lightly and walked forward. Sasuke followed me, and I realized that from that moment a new life began, but not the same as before. After all, they are no longer with us. POV of Saxony. Good day. To begin with, I wanted to introduce myself to you. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I am the son of the head of the clan and the younger brother of the clan genius. Even though I am the son of the head, I cannot become one myself, for the reason that my older brother had to become one. He was a genius, and the pride of the Uchiha clan. Not everyone could boast of awakening the Sharingan at an early age and then becoming an ANBU at the age of 11. I admired my brother and always looked up to him, trying to study hard and one day surpass him. But all efforts were in vain and I remained in his shadow. Then Naruto Harem appeared. She was the same genius as her brother and Shisui-san. But she was not arrogant, she was not proud of it, but simply silently took it for granted and, not paying any attention to those who looked askance at her. She is proud, strong, brave, and also beautiful. I gradually began to admire her and consider her an older sister. And without even noticing to himself, he began to repeat after his brother, calling her Naruto Harem. She was angry, irritated and asked to stop calling her that, but then she resigned herself and got used to it. Naruto began to train me, helping and giving advice, and soon my brother, Shisui-san and Alex-san, who was her brother, although not by blood, joined the training. Naruto was happy, having fun, laughing, and just living. When I found out that Shisui-san proposed to her, I was sincerely happy for her, because she was so happy that I couldn't help but smile. I remember my shock when I found out that Naruto Harem was my age. I probably spent several days in a stupor, not reacting to anything. I couldn't believe that Naruto, who looked 2 years younger than her brother and Shisui-san, was my age. It was something with something. From that moment on, I began to train even harder to catch up with Naruto, and then surpass Itachi and Ai-san. But then everything broke off and flew into the abyss, not allowing it to be revived. News arrived that Alex-san had died on a mission. I have never seen her so depressed. Everyone supported her and put her in order, and she gradually returned to her previous state, although she does not smile brightly as before. But after some time it became known about the death of Shisui-san. Then I was already really scared. Seeing all the changes that had happened to Naruto, I also felt bad myself. Her gambling sparkle in her eyes went out, and her gaze became empty. The smile left her face and never showed again. And so the pale face became even paler. She closed herself off, not reacting to anything or anyone. Naruto locked herself in her room and didn't even come out to eat. Behind the door, you could hear quiet crying and sobbing. My brother tried to support her, not to leave her alone, just like me and everyone in the clan, like my parents. After all, Naruto became part of our family, part of our clan, and everyone with the surname Uchiha felt this. But one day, sitting in the kitchen, I noticed Naruto going outside. I decided to follow her because she looked completely lost, as if she wanted to commit suicide. I was wary and frightened by my own thoughts and reasoning, but decided not to think about it for now. So I didn't notice how Naruto had already melted on the mountain with the faces of the Hokage. She walked to the very edge, peering into space, and then began to sing quietly. I looked at her in fascination, and she kept singing, and her voice became louder, and the words of the song were saturated with grief, sadness, pain, loneliness, and, worst of all, no desire to live. Tears were streaming down her face, without stopping. Her gaze was fixed first on the starry sky, then on the village, which seemed to be burning with different lights. Gradually the song ended, and she resolutely began to take a step into the abyss. I got scared and ran up to her and hugged her from behind. I began to ask not to do this. He said that he would hurt those who remained and who were next to her. I said a lot more, trying to reason, support, showing that I was there and others were with her. She dropped to her knees and burst into tears. Then the routine began. The 2 months were calm and there were no signs of trouble. Naruto never smiled, nor did the usual sparkle of enthusiasm appear in her eyes. Her character has changed. Previously, she was cheerful, gambling and wild, rarely calm. But now she was very calm, not showing any signs of her past violent behavior. And I didn't like it, but I couldn't change anything. And then, 2 months later, From Naruto I learned the whole truth about the death of Shisui, about herself, about Itachi, who was given the task of slaughtering the Uchiha clan, except for me. From what I heard, I fell into a stupor, and then I was overcome by rage, hatred, and the desire for revenge. If it weren't for Naruto, who explained to me that it was too early for revenge, I probably would have run to the culprits right then and there, hoping to take revenge. After a difficult conversation, I passed out, and when I came to my senses, I learned that my Sharingan with 3 tomo had awakened. For 2 weeks, 3 days of which I lay unconscious, we cleaned up the neighborhood and cremated the Uchiha. I continued to go to the academy, where I constantly ran from these chickens, who kept feeling sorry for me and tried to support me in difficult times, and sympathized with me about the loss of the clan. And after Naruto Harem received a letter with some bottles, and a day later they learned that Itachi had died. This news hit me hard, but after a while I came to my senses, and decided that I would protect Naruto Harem instead of my brother, Shisui-san and Alex-san. When I finally returned to normal, Naruto Harem told me to collect all the essential things and wait for her. After some time, she returned, sealed the backpack in a scroll and, putting it away, said that we were going on a journey. We met Kakashi-sensei near the gate and after talking a little, we set off. Quite a long time has passed. 4 years is not a short time for you. During this time, a lot happened, and a lot of people met. But let's take things in order. At first, we simply wandered idly through villages and towns in the vicinity of the Land of Fire. We didn't stay in one place for long. They often spent the night in the forest or in some clearings. I silently followed her, making no attempt to object or ask anything. But soon I could not stand it and asked why we didn't stop somewhere for a long time and start training, to which I received a laconic answer: "We'll start training in 3 months. During this time we must get used to the journey and the environment. Besides, during these 3 months I will come up with and draw up a training plan for the first time." After this answer, I no longer objected, believing that she knew better. Even though we are the same age. She looks older and is much stronger than me. 3 months passed like this. Naruto Harem gave me scrolls and books, explaining this so that I had knowledge of a particular area and focus. I also trained my ingenuity, my mind, and developed various kinds of strategies and tactics while playing shogi. But we never started training the techniques. And after 3 months, she announced the start of our training. When I saw the list, I fell into culture shock, but did not become indignant. At first, I trained physically, developing speed, agility, and endurance. I learned to set traps, as well as detect and neutralize them. He learned throwing, hand-to-hand combat, and weapon handling. Besides this, I meditated. But we never started studying the techniques. She even forbade me to turn on the Sharingan. It was, of course, unpleasant, but I understood that it was not without reason. This went on for 6 months, after which I couldn't stand it and asked a question that interested me. Flashback. We were in the forest, in one small clearing. I did the exercises given by Naruto, and she sat in the shade of a tree and read some scroll, from time to time looking at me and my progress. Having finished the exercise with me and a little warm-up before the taijutsu lesson, I went up to the sitting girl and sat down next to her, began to look at the trees. After a couple of minutes, I decided to break the prevailing silence. "Naruto Harem, can I ask a question?" I asked, looking at the girl. She looked up from reading the scroll and looked at me. "Yes?" she asked, looking at me continuously. I swallowed and decided to ask the question that had been bothering me lately. "Tell me, how long will I train at this pace? And when will I start learning techniques and Sharingan?" I asked. She looked at me thoughtfully and after a minute answered. "Well, it lasts, such training will be for about another 6 months. After the time has passed, training with easy-level techniques will begin, and the rank will gradually increase after an equal period of time. But with the Sharingan certain problems arise. I'm not an Uchiha and I don't know your dojutsu. Therefore, I cannot teach him for obvious reasons. You will have to comprehend and develop everything yourself." I can only give you a scroll with Itachi's notes, which he gave me on the eve of the task. But you won't be able to work with the Sharingan for at least a year and a half. More precisely, not earlier than a year after you start using the techniques, Naruto explained. But with the answer, a new question arose, which I hastened to voice. But why so late? Why not now? Because your chakra channels are not developed enough to start training with techniques, she answered calmly and turned her head, burying herself in the scroll again. But I'm from the Uchiha clan. My channels are developed enough to start learning techniques. Besides, I'm the best student at the academy. I objected. This was the first time in my memory that I objected to her. Sasuke, tell me what my last name is? Naruto suddenly asked, looking at me carefully. I blinked my eyes in surprise, not understanding what her last name had to do with it, but still answered. Uzumaki. And what does your last name have to do with it? Sasuke, there used to be such a clan as the Uzumaki clan. They were also called Red Devils. Absolutely everyone feared and respected them. The clan was famous for its longevity and incredibly powerful and strong chakra, and the clan were also masters of Huinjutsu. They could seal anything, they could create very strong barriers. There were also attack and healing seals. Uzumaki were excellent sensors. My clan could fight the Bijou for a very long time and also seal it. Besides this, the Uzumaki are the only ones who survived after the tailed creatures were extracted from them. The Uzumaki had their own village, Whirlpool, and they were allies of Konoha. But the clan was destroyed during the Third World War. Fear defeated respect and the Uzumaki were attacked from 3 sides. The village was destroyed, and the surviving Uzumaki themselves scattered all over the world, she explained. I looked at her in shock and could not believe that Naruto was from a strong clan, or rather, I could not believe that she was from any clan at all. Meanwhile, she continued, I also started my training, just like you. But chakra control was much more difficult for me, since I have much more of it than the Uzumaki clan. Even now I can't use many techniques. I can't use most of them because I haven't fully taken control of my chakra. More precisely, my channels have not fully developed to allow more chakra to pass through them than they can handle. So I meditate to increase and strengthen the channels. I only have a little time left, and when you start studying the techniques, I will begin to hone what I couldn't do because the techniques were very chakra intensive, she explained. I was digesting the information I received, and then something dawned on me. Isn't Naruto on the same level of power as Itachi and Ai-san and Shisui-san with Kakashi-sensei and Alex-san? This question is quite interesting. After all, it turns out that she couldn't use most of her techniques? But Naruto, aren't you on the same level as your brother? I asked. She thought, but I didn't interrupt her from her thoughts. No. I am weaker, although not much, but still weaker. I often lost to them in training. I'm still learning and growing, and with me, the channels are growing and strengthening, and the volume of chakra is also increasing, she answered. Naruto tried to hide the pain and sadness in her voice, but I noticed it and promised myself that I would no longer mention them in front of her. This is where my questions to her ended. I went on to train, and she continued to read the scroll. But after a while, she put it aside and headed towards me to start performing other exercises and showing the necessary stances and combinations. I didn't approach her with this question again and did what was required of me. And, flashback. My training went at this pace. We continued our journey, stopping sometimes in villages, sometimes in small towns or settlements. Naruto was changing before our eyes. There was no trace left of that depression. The character has changed radically, not a trace remains of the old Naruto. Although there was a smile, it was light and almost unnoticeable. There is not that emptiness in the eyes, but it has turned into steel and determination. I began to study techniques, and Naruto began to hone her techniques, which she could not do. Also, her dressing style has changed. She began to wear black breeches, a short red combat kimono with the image of a fox, and on top of the kimono she wore a black and red haori with a red fire pattern on the hem, and on the back was the hieroglyph Sannin. Ask why Sannin? Well, everything here is simple and complicated at the same time. When I approached the study of the call, Naruto told me to use the call without a seal. After following the instructions I disappeared. When I returned back, she was already wearing these clothes. Having asked about this, Naruto said that she was at her summoning and there she studied the Sannin section and accepted this title, so to speak. Her call turned out to be foxes. Although this was to be expected. Firstly, the nine-tailed fox is sealed within her, which influenced her summoning. And, secondly, she is a fox herself. Her ears and tail contributed to the determination of the call. Well, my call turned out to be a hawk. Later, Naruto Harem said that I would most likely be able to learn another summon. This is rare, but it happens. Naruto herself may not have a second call due to the fact that most likely there is no longer a single animal suitable for her. After training with the summons, she finally changed. 2 low ponytails were added to her changed clothes. She also began to gamble. They didn't tell her anything about this, because Naruto used Hyang and became a little older. Gradually the Hyang was removed and soon she began to gamble without changing her age. She constantly won in games and her nickname given to her by the ANBU added the word lucky or playful. In addition to gaming, she began to drink alcohol. When I asked her about this, she replied, "This is how I drown out my pain." After that, I didn't pester her, but I constantly tried to dissuade her or take away another bottle. They didn't tell her anything about this either, since she acted according to the same scheme. The appearance remained the same, but the age changed. The training went on as usual. Gradually we stopped studying anything, but only honed what we already knew. Naruto Harem forced him to study constantly, saying that he should not lose his skill. Therefore, I had no choice but to repeat the same thing. Naruto assured me that we would learn something new, but not now. Days, weeks, months passed. The time for our return was gradually approaching. But neither I, nor especially Naruto Harem, talked about this. None of us raised this topic, continuing to travel, wander from village to village, from city to city, train, hone our skills. Occasionally we took on assignments to escort caravans, nobles, and provide security. Naruto even took on the task of elimination and surveillance, but she didn't take me with her on such tasks, explaining everything by saying that it was too early for me. I was not offended, realizing that I would still have time to kill someone, so I silently waited for her to return. He took on tasks so that there would be money for hotels and food, and for drinks for Naruto. To my indignation, she replied no less indignantly, "I have the right to rest. So don't stop me from spending my free time profitably." At this I groaned and looked at her displeasedly. No, well, this is sheer impudence. Kurama was also indignant, because when she returned to the room, she fell onto the bed, began to squeeze and hug him, and fell asleep with him, hugging him tightly so that he could not get out. By the way, about Kurama. This is the nine-tailed fox demon, Kyubi no Yoko. Naruto, having removed the seal and remade it, made it possible for the fox to walk freely and move away from the Jinchuriki at fairly large distances. Only its size is no larger than that of a dog. Kurama can change his size from a small fox to the size of a large dog. He was so happy about this that he jumped, galloped, rushed, rolled on the floor, and ate a lot of meat for a very long time. But when Naruto returned to the room in a not very sober state and began to squeeze him, all the fox's passion instantly disappeared. He sulked at her for a long time, but he couldn't do anything about it. And then one sunny day Naruto Harem and I were sitting at a table in some coffee. She sipped sake and ate dango as usual, and I just drank tea with sweets. We were having a casual conversation when we were suddenly interrupted. We took a break from our task and looked at the troublemaker. It turned out to be 2 people. One was a man about 25 to 28 years old, with white hair that defies the laws of gravity. A protector with the Konoha sign covered one eye. He was dressed in a standard shinobi uniform with a jonin vest. The lower part of the face was covered by a mask from a blue turtleneck uniform. Next to him was a girl with bright pink hair that reached just below the middle of her back. Large forehead and green eyes, reminiscent of foliage or grass. A blue head protector with the Konoha symbol was tied around the head, separating the front strands. The clothes were either a pink or red dress with slits on both sides up to the thigh, and there was a large white circle on the back. Green shorts and blue shinobi sandals. She also had standard weapon pouches. I recognized the man as Kakashi, but the girl seemed vaguely familiar to me, but I can't remember where I saw her before. While I was looking at them and indulging in my thoughts, Kakashi began a conversation, sitting opposite us with the pink-haired one. "Long time no see, Naruto, Sasuke," he said and smiled, which was noticeable even through the mask. "I feel like they came for a reason. So the Hokage finally decided to bring us back after we didn't show up on time and sent them after us? Interesting. I think Naruto Harem will begin to carry out our plan that we made a year ago. It will be fun for sure. But, nevertheless, I will be on guard and will not allow Naruto Harem to be harmed. Because I promised not only to myself, but also to them. So while executing the plan, I will always be on guard." "It's been a really long time," Naruto said as she drank a glass of sake and ate one ball of dango. "Why did you come?" "We came for you to return you to Konoha on the orders of the Hokage." "We came for you to return you to Konoha on the orders of the Hokage. Sasuke will become the second member of Team Number 7, and you will be the second mentor," Kakashi said. "No, well, this is completely overkill." "Okay, Sasuke, he should at least get the Konoha protector and do some missions so he can gain more experience, which is what he has now. And he needs to communicate with his peers. I, of course, am his age, but I look older, and I have more experience and knowledge, thanks to those dreams when I first met Ku. But how am I intertwined here? So not only do they return me to the village, they also make me a mentor. And okay, Sasuke, I know him well, and I train him, but I'm unlikely to teach this pink-haired thing anything. By the way, we need to find out who he brought. I'm wondering, did I really make a clear promise that I would return to the village in exactly 4 years? I said that if we were released voluntarily, we would return someday. The key word is someday. And the fact that the Hokage said to return to the distribution of genin, I just agreed for show, so as not to pester me. And the fact that he didn't understand this is not my problem, I said and drank another glass of sake. Kakashi looked at me strangely, but for now remained silent on this matter. But something tells me that soon he won't be able to restrain himself and ask. I don't care, Sasuke, and I have had enough of his moralizing. Sometimes this kind of concern infuriates me. Naruto, you really should go back. The Hokage is already barely holding back the onslaught of the elders and Danzo. If you continue your journey and do not return with us, he himself will send his people after you. I don't think it's worth provoking him yet. And something tells me that you two already have a plan for Danzo, Kakashi said. I winced with displeasure and poured it into the glass again and drank it. You know everything, Kakashi, I grinned, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed how the Uchiha sighed heavily and shook his head. No, what was that even? What is he unhappy about this time? Sometimes I don't understand him. He is sometimes cheerful, sometimes boring, sometimes quiet and thoughtful. No, I can't decide, he changes his emotions at such a speed that I can't keep track. He's actually some kind of wrong Uchiha. Although I have to admit that he knows how to hold the mask of the Uchiha clan and often uses it. You clown. While I was thinking and watching Hitaki, this thing that came with Senpai came into the conversation. Who is this Danzo of yours, and what kind of plans are they? And why aren't you going to return to the village? This is an order from Hokage-sama. And Sasuke-kun should be on the same team with me. So let him return, and you go on traveling. This girl was indignant. I glared at her so much that she became shy, but I didn't lose my determination and my intentions. Girl, weren't you taught not to interfere in the conversations of elders? And in general you can't eavesdrop on other people's conversations? I asked, looking closely at this impudent girl. By the way, Kakashi, would you introduce her? Who would be talking about adults? You yourself are still a child and her age. And anyway, isn't it a little early for you to drink sake? Kakashi asked, while giving away my age. I looked at him displeasedly and, chuckled, answered. Well, if you haven't forgotten, then I look older than my age, that's it. And, secondly, my knowledge, thoughts and reasoning are much more mature than this girl's. And in general, maybe you can introduce her to me already? I asked the same question again. I didn't say anything about Sasuke, because I was aware that he had to finish with her. The Uchiha chuckled and looked at me strangely. No, what's the problem again? He's always like this. Scowling, I didn't notice how my ears twitched and pressed against my head. And my tail began to lash, displeasedly from side to side. Yes, sorry. This is Haruno Sakura. She is my student. Sasuke and you were also supposed to become my students, but I persuaded the Hokage to make you the second mentor, Hatake answered. It will be very difficult, judging by her eyes, which look admiringly at the Uchiha and send loving hearts. Hearing her name, she switched to me, and her gaze became angry. I don't understand, what did I actually do to her? Clear. So we have no choice? I asked, to which I received a nod in agreement. I sighed heavily and looked at the brunette sitting next to me. He nodded his head slightly, agreeing with Kakashi. So, are we going back after all? I really wanted to stall for time a little, before meeting this clown. Well, it's okay, there's just a little time left, and I can avenge you, and then I'll finally leave the village with Sasuke. Still, he has become a close person to me, and I don't want to leave him alone. Okay. Then we'll head out tomorrow morning. Rest today, you're off the road after all, I said, getting up from the table and leaving the money. We'll meet you at the exit from the city. After these words, Sasuke and I left the establishment. Walking along the city street to the hotel where we were staying, I really thought about it. On the one hand, our return was not planned in the near future, which is why we will have to slightly adjust the invented plan. Although not much, but still. On the other hand, Danzo will not give us a pass and a quiet life, constantly sending his route to our souls. Well, how could it be otherwise? After all, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, the weapon of the village and the last representative of the Uchiha clan, is walking outside the village and uncontrollably. Danzo either killed him immediately, and removed Kurama and resealed him, and took the Sharingan from the Uchiha, or took him to his base and made obedient puppets. None of the options suited me, so we never had that choice. Either we calmly return to the village, or we are finished. Are you sure we should go back now? Asked Sasuke, who was silent the whole time while the conversation was going on with Kakashi and the pink-haired girl, and sometimes looked in my direction. Sure. I somehow don't want the nasty old man to get involved in this. Because we are returning, we have to change the plan a little, I answered. We have already approached the hotel and are now going up to our room. There is still a lot to discuss before we leave for Konoha. Morning came somehow unexpectedly. And very unexpected for me. This asshole threw me to the floor by taking away the warm blanket. He also makes the most innocent expression on his face. I'll remind him of this and load him with training, which will make him forget to wake me up in such ways for a long time. Cursing, I got up from the floor, took my clothes and headed to the bathroom to clean myself up. After half an hour of water treatments, I came out of the shower already dressed, combed and refreshed. Oddly enough, I didn't suffer from a hangover. Apparently I didn't drink enough yesterday. Anyway. Nodding to the Uchiha, we left the room and, having rented and paid for the room, headed towards the exit from the city. Kakashi and Sakura were already waiting for us there. Seeing us, this pink-haired something began to be indignant. Why are you late, and even delayed Sasuke-kun? Oh, how she already annoys me. At the first serious task, she will give up her position, get scared, tremble like an aspen leaf and faint. She will drag the entire team down without doing anything to increase her strength and help her comrades. She won't really train but will look at Sasuke in admiration and sigh languidly, casting loving glances at him. And she has the bare minimum of chakra and probably knows only basic techniques studied at the academy. Possibly good knowledge of theory, but unable to apply it in practice. Throwing is weak, most likely does not wield any weapons, and she is also weak in hand-to-hand combat. Maybe things aren't so bad with control, since it's better to control a small amount of chakra. She should learn Mijitsu and become a doctor. In battle, she will simply merge immediately. I examined her for a long time and carefully, drawing my conclusions based on external data. And something tells me that most, if not all, are correct. For starters, I will be your mentor along with Kakashi, so address me appropriately. Secondly, I didn't say the time we meet here. We could come later, or maybe even in the evening. So, be glad that we arrived so early, I said, and then I no longer paid any attention to her. We silently set out on our way. On the way, I had a conversation with Kakashi and Sasuke, but Sakura was still flying in the clouds, not looking around and staring with her eyes at the Uchiha. This sight made me shudder. Sasuke didn't pay attention to this, apparently he got used to it during the time he studied at the academy, and now it was just a reflex. Sakura, remember once and for all. You are a kunoichi, and danger may await you on any mission. In the forests there are Nukanins and ordinary bandits who can attack at any time. No one will save you, so you have to take care of yourself. If you don't notice the enemy in time, at best you will simply be wounded, at worst, you can die. Take off your rose-colored glasses and look at the world soberly, and not in love with the Uchiha. You are not living in a fairy tale, here you can easily die. Do you understand? I couldn't stand it and gave a short lecture and, without waiting for an answer, continued. So stop sighing for the Uchiha and dreaming about the impossible and start looking around. I feel like it will be very, very difficult with her. The road was relatively calm. After my lecture, so to speak, Haruno became quiet and even collected herself, starting to quietly, and sometimes even very noticeably, look around. But at times she forgot and began to stare again. Noticing this, then Kakashi, or even both, looked at her with displeasure. After all, the Hokage sent her along with Kakashi on a rather serious mission immediately after graduating and receiving the rank of genin, and she is chilling. In general, nothing like that happened the whole way. And now we passed the gate and headed straight to the residence. Kakashi and Sakura for the report, and me and Sasuke for the conversation. Of course, I wasn't attracted to this prospect, since Sarutobi-sama would start lecturing again, but we still had no choice. 20 minutes later, we were already standing near the door to the Hokage's office. Hatake knocked and, after waiting for permission to enter, opened the door and walked into the room. Our trio followed suit. Hokage-sama, the task is completed. We found Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke and brought them to the village, Senpai reported. The Hokage put aside the paper he had been holding until that moment and looked at our group. Fine. You will bring a detailed report later. And now you and Sakura can be free, Sarutobi said. When Haruno and Hatake left, he turned his thoughtful gaze to us. 5 minutes later, he said. And why didn't you show up for assignment to teams? He asked. I chuckled and didn't answer, figuring that Kakashi would write everything in his report. But Sasuke apparently decided to inform the Hokage about this, because he realized that I would not say anything. Naruto Haim told Kakashi-sensei everything when we met. I think he will write about this in his report, he said. Hiruzen looked at us with an attentive gaze, then sighed and said. Okay. Then what have you learned? More precisely, what did you teach Sasuke? I need to take an exam from him. And since I don't have time, I just want to know his skills. I thought about this question. On the one hand, I don't want to reveal Sasuke's strength, and mine too, but on the other hand, it's impossible not to answer. So what should we do? Hokage-sama, let Kakashi conduct the training, and you look at Sasuke's skills? Otherwise it's too long to tell, and we're tired from the road. I found a way out of this situation. After all, it will be much easier this way. Firstly, I will not reveal all the abilities of the Hokage in his office, taking into account the fact that the room is being monitored not only by ANBU, but also by Root. Secondly, Sasuke himself will decide what needs to be shown to the Hokage and what is not necessary. And thirdly, we will only have one advantage, so Danzo will know that Sasuke is not dangerous, and I remained at the same level, adding the title of Sannin and a couple of new, slightly complex techniques, which is what we need. Fine. I will inform Kakashi about the decision, and he, in turn, will tell you the time and place. And now you can go and rest, the Hokage decided after some hesitation. We bowed and left the office. We got home relatively quickly. Touching the barrier, I made a small series of seals with one hand and released chakra. The barrier blinked and a second later a passage opened in it. Having passed the barrier, I restored it, promising myself that tomorrow I would change it a little. As soon as I entered the house, I was immediately overtaken by Sasuke's question. Why is there not a single speck of dust here? After all, we were gone for 4 years, and no one cleaned the house? I put up a special barrier that freezes time, I answered, walking into the kitchen and opening the refrigerator. The advantage of such a barrier is that the food does not spoil, even if 20 years, 100 years or 500 years pass. A very useful function for the barrier, don't you think? Having taken out the necessary ingredients, I started cooking. An hour later, Sasuke came down in his home clothes. Having set the table and placing plates of food, we began to eat. After finishing lunch, we did a little training until the evening, then had dinner and went to the shower. Fortunately, this house has 2 bathrooms. After taking a refreshing shower, I went into my room and, straightening out the bed, lay down on it, immediately plunging into the kingdom of Morpheus. Today and the previous days that passed on the way to the village exhausted me. So I calmly succumbed to the gentle hands that pulled me into the world of beautiful dreams. Morning came unexpectedly for me, as always. Sasuke woke me up again with ice water. I don't even want to know where he gets it from. Yes, even if I wanted to, I still wouldn't be able to find out. Sasuke always keeps his secrets so securely that even with his claws, you can't pull anything out of him. But that's not about that now. I woke up from the fact that he once again poured very, very cold water on me, which made me jump out of bed and safely plop onto the floor, face down. And you know this is very painful. Rising from the floor and sitting cross-legged on the same floor, I began to rub my sore nose and look angrily at the Uchiha, who was grinning impudently. How many times do you need to repeat so that you don't wake me up so early and in this way? I asked, looking angrily and displeasedly at Sasuke. I will do this until you yourself get up at the right time, said the Uchiha and left the room with a bucket in his hands. I sighed heavily and, shaking my head, got up from the floor and, taking my things, headed to the shower. I spent no more or less than an hour in the bathroom. I would have sat there longer if it weren't for Sasuke's call that it was time for breakfast. So I reluctantly got out of the bathroom, dried myself thoroughly, dried my hair, got dressed, washed my face, and, tying my hair into 2 low ponytails, got out of the shower and headed to the kitchen. The Uchiha was already sitting there, devouring breakfast in the form of scrambled eggs and tomatoes. Of course, I don't like tomatoes, but I didn't have much choice, so I had to eat what Sasuke cooked. Don't think I can cook, but sometimes I'm so lazy or incapable that Sasuke had to learn, and now he almost always cooks himself. But herein lies one problem. He cooks all his food with tomatoes. Can you imagine this? That's why I disliked those tomatoes. No matter how much I talked to him about this topic, but as you can see, there was no result. Sasuke, tell me, when will you stop cooking everything with tomatoes? I couldn't resist and, pushing the plate away from me, frowned at the Uchiha. He looked away from what he was doing and looked at me. What's the problem? He asked. No, he's also dissatisfied with something. Actually, I should be dissatisfied with the fact that I constantly eat only tomatoes. I'm already sick of them, but he goes on and on. And you still ask what the problem is? I asked sarcastically. I can't eat your tomatoes anymore. Can you cook something else without adding this vegetable? If you don't like it, then cook it yourself, this clown said calmly. Sometimes I just want to hit him with something heavy, just to discourage him. Sasuke, please. You know that you can't count on me for cooking, right? I asked and looked at him pleadingly. He sighed, got up from the table, and headed to the sink to wash the dishes. I know. But your cooking is delicious, so I don't see any problem in that, said the Uchiha. I frowned again with displeasure and decided to use my last trump card, which I don't even like at all. Sasuke, I called him. He shuddered and turned to me. I made pleading eyes, pressed my ears to the top of my head, and wagged my tail. I always knew that my appearance always had a flawless effect on Sasuke. And this time he did not disappoint. Well, okay. Just don't do that again, he agreed and begged. I chuckled triumphantly and wagged my tail happily. At that moment, the kettle boiled and Sasuke, turning it off, poured tea into mugs and placed one in front of me. Just as we were about to start drinking tea, Kakashi jumped into the window. Good morning to you, Kakashi said, entering the room and sitting down at the table. Sasuke poured him some tea, placing the mug in front of him. Good. Why did you come in? There was no point in asking how he got here, since last time there was access for him in the barrier. Hatake never comes in so early, especially just to visit. This means that he is either on behalf of the Hokage, or he has a conversation with me or us. Can't I just come and visit? He asked with a smile on his face that could be seen through the mask. You just like that? I wouldn't believe it in real life. Especially so early. I said with a slightly dissatisfied note in my voice. And don't look at me like that, I still won't believe it, I continued immediately, seeing his look. He chuckled, but did not answer, continuing to drink his tea. So what brings you to us, Kakashi-sensei? Is this something related to our inspection? Sasuke inserted his word, after which I barely restrained myself from slapping my forehead with my palm. I could have guessed why Kakashi showed up so early. But this blonde guy didn't even bother to say so right away. You're right, Sasuke. The Hokage informed me about you and told me to hold a battle in which he will decide whether to give Sasuke the bandage or not. In principle, this is unnecessary for you, but the Hokage, nevertheless, decided to conduct a test for you, only this will be an ordinary training battle. But Sasuke and Sakura will take one test, according to which I will decide whether they will become a team or not, I already said about the Hokage's decision. In other words, you will have to try twice as hard, Sasuke, Kakashi replied, and I began to think about the information received. It turns out that Sakura and Sasuke will undergo a teamwork test arranged by Kakashi, plus Sasuke will be watched by the Hokage, who will decide based on his skills whether he will become a genin or not. I will have a training fight with Kakashi, who must show the same Hokage whether I am worthy to accept the Jonin vest. After all, I was an ANBU, without having any positions like Genin, Chunin, or Jonin. I didn't even wear a shinobi headband. It turns out that both Sasuke and I will have to give our best so that this old senile Danzo does not have any questions. I especially will have to do this. But at the same time, I have to show that I am strong enough for a Jounin and justify the title of Sannin. And this is not so easy. For all my thoughts, I didn't even notice how my tail began to nervously wag from side to side, and my ears began to tremble. My leg began to beat an irregular rhythm, showing my nervousness. And judging by Sasuke's look, he noticed it. And Kakashi wasn't far from him. Naruto Harem, is something bothering you? Sasuke asked me, to which I shook my head in different directions, stopped tapping my foot and more or less calmed my tail and ears. No, everything is okay. Don't pay attention, I said, looking at the Uchiha. He looked at me incredulously, but did not object or ask anything. So, when and what time? This time I turned to Hataka, looking seriously in his direction. Tomorrow, at 9 o'clock at the 7th training ground, he said. I just nodded that I understood everything. Kakashi, having finished his tea and thanked him, headed to the window to leave through it. And just try to be late, you know what will happen to you in this case, I said, before Hataki jumped through the window. But I managed to shout out. What do you need a door for? I shouted indignantly, but in response I heard a light laugh. Well, if you get caught by me, you'll instantly get hit on the head, you'll immediately learn how to walk through windows. What are you planning to do now? The Uchiha asked me, putting the cups in the sink and washing them. I'm thinking of visiting a friend, and at the same time I'll walk around the village, I said, thinking for a moment, and then continued. I need to try Konakovsko sake, so I'll be late. Don't wait for me, I said, getting up from the table and heading out of the house. Sasuke followed me, apparently he wants to lecture me about the dangers of alcohol again. He's kind of boring. Naruto Harem. I asked you not to drink. He exclaimed indignantly, to which I shrugged and, putting on my shoes, opened the door. That's all, I'm going out. And don't forget to feed Ku, I let him out before going to the kitchen. He's in my room, and before he started to be indignant again, I quickly retreated outside. Walking along such familiar streets, I was finally convinced that Konoha had not changed. She is still as peaceful and calm and at the same time aggressive and ready to repel an attack at any moment. So, walking through the village, I didn't notice how I ran into someone. Looking at this someone, I smiled slightly. Still, during this time, I never began to smile as before, no matter how much Sasuke struggled with it. Yukiri? I asked the girl who had fallen from the collision. She looked up at me and smiled joyfully, immediately jumping up and rushing to hug me. Naruto-chan. I'm so glad you're back. Others will also be happy to see you. How was the trip? What new did you see? How was the training? You have changed so much. I didn't even recognize you at first. Incredible beauty. And the ears and tail make you even more beautiful, as I said. Good for you for stopping hiding them. Well, let's go to ours. We'll celebrate your return at the same time. And we'll call Kakashi. After all, he is also one of the ANBU, albeit a former one. Come on, let's go faster. Yukiri babbled, not allowing me to get a word in. Hey, Yukiri, wait a little. I can't keep up with your train of thoughts. I said, stopping the girl. Let me tell you everything, how will we get to the base? I'm not eager to repeat everything several times, I asked, to which my friend just nodded and, continuing to smile joyfully, took me to the ANBU base. Half an hour later, we arrived at the base, where I once rested after training and missions. There are so many memories of my brother, Shisui, and Itachi, which made me sad involuntarily. Yukiri apparently noticed this, so she smiled sadly and looked at me and said, I'm sorry, I somehow didn't think, she said, and I quickly threw the sad thoughts out of my head and, pulling myself together, tried to smile. It's okay, really. I'm fine, I tried to reassure her. But she did not give in and, taking my hand, quickly led me in the direction of the room where the ANBU should now be resting. Without knocking, she opened the door and said loudly, Guys! Naruto-chan is back. So change your clothes and come to our cafe. This should be noted. She said and quickly left the room, dragging me along with her. I didn't resist, because I knew it was useless. By the way, Yukiri herself was dressed in civilian clothes, which meant that she had a day off. 20 minutes later, we were at the cafe. Having taken a far table and connecting several nearby tables with ours, we ordered a large amount of drinks and snacks and began to wait for the others. While we were waiting, we drank one bottle of sake. And then, after half an hour, everyone pulled up and, having taken their places, began to share the news, and at the same time ask me their questions. So we sat talking and having fun memories for 2 hours, while destroying more than half of the ordered drinks, which is 15 bottles out of 25. But our fun time was interrupted by a painfully familiar and hateful voice at the same time. "Has our little fox returned to the village?" the girl who approached said with sarcasm in her voice. About. Could it be that our litter ram decided to visit us? "And what did you need us for?" I asked with the same sarcasm, looking at her face twisted with anger. "What did you call me? I see you have become brave. Haven't received it for a long time, little fox?" This. Asked me. I never liked her, ever since our first meeting. Why am I wrong? You are carrying out espionage missions that involve deceiving a target. So you are Ram's litter. And I've always been brave, firstly, and secondly, you won't do anything to me. Now I'm much stronger than you, plus I'm a Sannin, so don't run into trouble, little. Everything was said with sarcasm and poison in the voice, and anger and irritation blazed in the eyes. She ruined everyone's happy mood. Yes, you, this fool tried to say something, but it was clear from her face that she couldn't come up with anything worthwhile to answer me. What you? Can't say anything? I said, looking at her with superiority. If you have nothing to say, please leave our company and not interfere with our fun, I continued. She looked at me angrily and, turning up her nose, proudly walked away. I just laughed at her, as did everyone here. To be honest, everyone around me didn't like this ram. So they all supported me after she left. Well? Shall we continue to have fun? I said, to which everyone happily agreed, and our holiday continued. Another hour later, the remaining 10 bottles were gone, and we ordered another 25 bottles. Our fun continued. As soon as the sake ran out, we ordered more, and this lasted until the cafe closed. We made so much noise that all the customers left, and the administrator closed the establishment, leaving us alone until the cafe actually had to close. And this is somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning. We did not argue, silently paid, we left the establishment and, saying goodbye, went to our homes. We were very, very drunk, so almost everyone did not walk, but crawled. And whoever was more or less sober walked, staggering, and dragged the one who was completely unable to even crawl, let alone stand up and walk on his own. I was one of the creeping ones. So I somehow made it home. On the 20th attempt, I opened the door and burst into the house. The lights were on in the hall, which meant that Sasuke had been waiting for my return all this time. Walking into the room on all fours, I looked at the sitting Uchiha. He looked at me displeasedly and, probably, menacingly. Oh. Hick. Sasuke. Hick. Why aren't you sleeping? Hick? I asked the brunette with a slurred tongue. Having crawled to the sofa, I somehow climbed onto it and fell on my back, hanging my arm. I'm waiting for you, Yukika said, and after a minute he continued. And how much did you drink? He asked, frowning. I thought about it, counting the number of bottles I had drunk, and then, giving up on this thankless task, I said. 2. I said, showing with my hands the number of bottles, which led to me falling from the comfortable sofa. Oh, I said thoughtfully. And remained lying on the floor, making no attempt to get up. Sasuke sighed heavily, came up to me, and, taking me in his arms, headed towards my room. There lay Kurama on my bed. Noticing my fox, I kicked out of the Uchiha's arms and fell onto the floor, crawling to the bed, while saying, Little fox, hick, Kuramachka, hick, let me hug you, hick, I said, and Ku, noticing my condition, jumped to his paws and began to look around, looking for exits. Uchiha, save me! Kurama exclaimed, looking pleadingly at Sasuke, but this did not help him, since I had already grabbed him and began to squeeze him. Falling onto the bed, and not letting Kurama out of the tight embrace, I began to say something. I don't remember what exactly. It seemed like it was, what a warm, soft, fluffy you are. Such a beautiful and kind little fox. You won't leave me, will you? And then I began to talk, frankly, some kind of incoherent nonsense. And after an hour of such incomprehensible nonsense that came from my mouth, I passed out, not noticing how Sasuke came up and covered me with a blanket, sighing heavily. I woke up not in the most pleasant way. Sasuke, the asshole, as always, woke me up at first light by pouring ice water over me. I, accordingly, jumped, as a result of which I fell face down on the floor. Pain pierced my head, and a desert passed through my mouth. I felt so bad that I didn't even become indignant about this, as usually happens. Kurama jumped off the bed and walked unhappily downstairs to the kitchen. Apparently I was tormenting him again. What the? I croaked, holding my pounding head. Sasuke handed me a glass of life-giving water and an aspirin tablet. Here, he said, and when I took my salvation and drank, he continued, you need to drink less and your head won't hurt. Just don't start, okay? I'm sick without you, I said, wrinkling my nose with displeasure. He just grunted at this, turned around and headed out of the room. Get yourself cleaned up and come down for breakfast. We'll have to go to the training ground soon, he said and left. I somehow got up from the floor and headed to the bathroom, taking clean things with me. I soaked in the bathroom for about an hour, but during this time my head stopped hurting so badly, leaving minor inconveniences. But it's still better not to move suddenly, and to avoid loud noise, otherwise the pain will return again. Before leaving the house, you need to circulate chakra through your body in order to finally come to your senses, otherwise something will happen during training. Finally getting out of the shower and putting on clean clothes, I tied 2 low ponytails and went down to the kitchen. There Sasuke was already eating with all his might, and Kurama was not far behind him. It's been a long time, Sasuke said, chewing his breakfast. And Ku was not even distracted from eating raw meat. Well, I had to get myself in complete order, right? At the same time, my head went away, though not completely, I shrugged, sitting down at the table. I hope not tomatoes again? I promised. So no, you don't have any tomatoes, he said. Indeed. In front of me was a plate of rice and meat, and not a single tomato. Finally. I thought I couldn't wait. I said, and started breakfast. When the food was finished and the dishes were washed, we took our equipment and headed out of the house. Having circulated the chakra through my body, I finally got rid of the hangover, so there shouldn't be any problems. I wonder if Kakashi is okay. After all, he was also at our party. Well, I'll find out soon anyway. We arrived at the training ground 20 minutes later. The clock was exactly 9 o'clock, so we arrived on time. Sakura was already standing there, I think that's her name, and was thinking hard about something. Well, Kakashi, as always, is not there. Which, however, is not surprising. Oh, Sakura. How long have you been waiting? I decided to greet the student. Even though I don't like her, it's still worth making contact. Yes, and a good kunoichi can come out of it, fortunately there is talent. Towards medicine. Oh. No, I just came over. But Kakashi-sensei is still missing, she said. Addressing me as if I were a student and genin like her. An obnoxious girl. I think I already told you that you should address me as a teacher. And Kakashi will be late again, and most likely longer than usual, I said, leaning against the training pole. What are you talking about? Sakura corrected herself when she saw my gaze. I don't want to explain anything, and I don't intend to. I don't have to answer to her, especially for Kakashi's actions. If she needs to know that, she should ask him. I can't stand people like her, they're too narcissistic. And Haruno all the time looks at Sasuke with loving eyes, and at me as if I were an enemy of the people, although I saw her for the first time when they came to that village for us. But no, I think I figured out why she was so negative towards me. Apparently he is jealous of Sasuke, thinking that we are dating. If only she knew that I love someone else who has long been dead. But I'm not going to betray him, and I never intended to. We love Uzumaki only once and for the rest of our lives, just like Uchiha's. Listen Sakura, Naruto Harem, Sasuke wanted to start saying, but I stopped him and shook my head. It's not time to tell her yet. We don't know each other well enough to discuss personal matters yet. It will be a long time before I tell her about Shirkuin. 3 hours have passed and still no sign of Kakashi. During this time we did not say another word. Sasuke threw strange glances at me, in which you can see sadness, and Sakura threw loving glances at the Uchiha, who completely ignored them. I looked at the sky and indulged either in memories or sad thoughts about the past. I couldn't understand this, because Hatake landed in the clearing. Well, where have you been, Kakashi? I asked, to which he scratched the back of his head guiltily and began to make excuses.